Welcome. In this lecture, we're going to go through horizontal asymptotes, to introduce horizontal asymptotes. So, horizontal asymptotes. So, horizontal asymptotes, and we're gonna, this is where this comes from, that we often call these HA, so horizontal asymptotes. Horizontal asymptotes occur when, so when do these occur? So they occur when we have that the limit as, and we're going to write these as x goes to infinity, right, of f of x, or the limit as x goes to minus infinity. And I made a choice to use, I know that I'm using my, nope, I am actually going to do my typical way of doing this. So the limit as x goes to minus infinity, right? So this is typical, so this is x as the limit, and now we have it's going to minus infinity of f of, so this is the same x, going towards infinity, or this x is going towards minus infinity, right? So we're looking at these limits when these limits are actually finite, right? And we can often find them by plugging in. So how do we find them? And we'll kind of go through this. So can often find by plugging in large numbers. So plugging in large numbers, right? And actually, let's do this in orange, because the numbers, when I'm saying I'm plugging in, I'm talking about x values or input values. So let's say plugging in large numbers, or looking at the graph to see what happens. Okay, so, or looking at the graph. And when you're plugging in large numbers, you're looking for the outputs, right? And seeing if you're approaching something finite. Okay, so, or looking at the graph and seeing what happens. At the graph to see what happens. Okay. So we're going to go through an example. So we want, and maybe we'll go ahead and, okay, so we want the horizontal asymptotes for, and then our function is f of x equals e to the x plus 1. So we get, so here's our x. Here's our y. We have here y equals e to the x, okay? And then we're looking at what happens, right? So if I look at it as I go towards minus infinity, then what's happening to this? This is actually approaching 1, right? These are my outputs are approaching 1, or x equals 1, right? So this is approaching, sorry, y equals 1. But if I'm approaching plus infinity over here, right? So these, notice that these like minus infinity and plus infinity that I'm looking at here, right? These, and maybe I'm going to make these red here. These are things that are happening in my x coordinates, right? So my x and coordinates now are getting infinitely big, and then the question is, so this one's finite, right? So this actually gives me a horizontal asymptote. Okay, so this approaches y equals 1. So finite, so horizontal asymptote, so finite. So I do get this horizontal asymptote, y equals 1. Okay, and so this is my only one. And where did that, and like to precisely say that what's going on here, so, right, I have that the limit, to kind of match it up with the picture up there, is that as x approaches minus infinity of this function, I get 1, right? Right? So that's how I knew that I had that horizontal asymptote, y equals 1. Okay, now on this side, as I go towards positive infinity, as my inputs go towards positive infinity, then what I see is like the limit here is not finite, so no horizontal asymptote here. So the limit here is not finite. So this is not a finite limit. It's actually approaching, right? If you look at this, this is approaching infinity because it's going infinitely high up. So this is not finite, so no horizontal asymptote here. So not finite. So no horizontal asymptote here. So no horizontal asymptote here. Okay, now let's look at this in terms of, this is like in terms of the graph, and then let's look at this. It's good to have both pictures kind of lined up in your mind. So let's go ahead and do that and kind of the connection between them. So let's look at what we had happens as we go to, because we do see that we get that horizontal asymptote as we go towards minus infinity. So let's see what's happening here that's going to indicate that. We're going to look at minus 1, and then minus 10, and then minus 100. Okay, and then we're going to look at our output. So this is e to the x plus 1, right? Well, now I'm going to put in, so if I take e to the, in each of these, just like make it clear to remind myself what I'm doing, I'm just going to replace x with parentheses in each of these. And then I want to put in these numbers from over here. So I've got, I'm putting in minus 1, I'm putting in minus 10, I'm putting in minus 100. Okay, and these are going to give me output. So this one is approximately equal to 1.36. I computed these ahead of time, so this is approximately equal to 1.36, 7879. This one here is approximately equal to, so you're going to see it's going to get close to 1 like so fast. So this is 1 point, and then I think I have 4 zeros before I even get to anything else. So this is like crazy close to 1. You would never notice the difference if you hadn't computed it like explicitly. And then already here I'm getting to, so I have 1 plus 3.72 times, like this number that we're going to add to that is going to be 10 to the minus 44th. So we're talking about like 44 zeros before we get to anything, okay? So we can also see from the chart, so this is kind of the chart we're looking at, and so here's kind of a comment here. So we can also see from the chart, so we can also see from this chart, so what can we see from the chart? Just like we could from the graph, right, is that the output values converge to 1. So we have output. So my output values, right, converge to 1. As, right, we have the, as the input are bigger and bigger negative values, right? So as the inputs are bigger and bigger negative values. So as inputs are bigger and bigger negative values. Bigger and bigger negative values. Negative x values, right? Or whatever our input variable is. Okay? So when we talk about vertical asymptotes, we're talking about, we're going to get like x equals something that look like this. Horizontal asymptotes look like this. You're putting in, when you either put in really big negative values or really big positive values, you are looking for where you end up with something finite. So it's not infinite. So this is not going to give us anything. This one did. This is approaching the line, right? So what is our asymptote here? Our asymptote is actually this line, y equals 1. So, right, so this is my horizontal asymptote, y equals 1. Why did it occur? It occurred because as I took the limit as I went towards negative infinity, I got 1. Okay? As I went here towards positive infinity, I happened to shoot up, and so You know, if I shot up and got infinity or shot down and got minus infinity, that's not going to give me a horizontal asymptote. It is possible to have one in this direction. Okay, you could have looked at it by looking at the graph. You can also look at it by putting in values that are getting infinitely big positive or infinitely big negative and seeing what you get out, as we did in the chart here. Okay, so I hope that made some sense, and I will see you in the next lecture.